The Canon R5C was just released recently by Canon. This is a whole different type of camera. It's sort of like a Franken camera, right? It's a full cinema camera spliced to the back of an R5 still camera. This takes hybrid to a whole new level. And it is priced at a competitive price point where the top of the line DSLRs are priced. And you get an entire cinema camera along with it. Because of the design of this camera, this begs the question, what's in it for me? Well, more importantly, what's in it for you? Let's have a look. So in order to try and answer this question, I think you have to ask yourself first, do you consider yourself a photographer first or videographer first? In the case of this camera, videographer really begins to mean cinematographer. So let's talk about a few of the characteristics of this camera that makes it what I call a cinema camera rather than just video added to a camera. The first one that I've heard a lot of people really upset about is it does not have in-body stabilization. Wow, that's a huge topic. I've heard it discussed in a lot of ways in various videos. Wow. But if you think about it from a professional perspective, the body is the starting point of a professional cinema workflow, right? They get the body, they add the lens, they add the viewer, they add the matte box, they add the rails, they add this, they add that. The body's somewhere in the middle in there. So with that mental perspective on what this camera is for, in-body stabilization becomes much less important if you're going to build out the camera that way anyway. It's going to go on rails. It's going to go on a gimbal. It's going to be built out. Okay, in-body stabilization is great. Not going to argue that. But it does take pixels away, right? In-body stabilization is software manipulation. And if you need the very highest quality image, you really don't want that. And if you truly are looking at cinema and commercial applications, not a bad trade-off if you're going to use it in the way that a cinema camera would be used. Another thing to think about with this camera is that the software workflow is not the EOS R software workflow. It's the EOS Cinema workflow, which has the professional cinematographer, videographer more in mind. We can argue on whether it's better or worse, but it's Canon's method, it's Canon's strategy, so they are targeting it by putting that software in there for that higher end market. Another thing I've heard about this camera is that when you're shooting video with the built-in battery, you better shoot quick because it's not going to last long. In fact, I don't think with battery you can actually power all the features. Not sure. I'm watching reviews with a lot of fascination on this camera to see this stuff. So what Canon is telling us with this, right, is they're telling us that it's designed to have external power. Once again, it's designed to be built out as a cinema or a commercial camera would be. Also, it's obviously not the end of the line for this because you can tell the design kind of ended, right? Like for instance, if they are positioning it for professional video cinema use, they don't have the ND filters, you know, and there's a few things like that that aren't done, aren't cooked, whatever, but you just know that those things are going to change in the future. I'm trying to figure out who it's for. What's the design intent? What kind of a photographer, videographer is this for? So the first thing, well, not the first thing, one of the first things that comes to mind where both are needed is in wedding videography, photography, right? Weddings today have both. I don't do a lot of weddings anymore at all. I've never been a videographer at a wedding, but I've been a photographer at weddings many times. Speaking for myself, I would find it very difficult to enter a wedding scenario where I was responsible for both video and still photography. Knowing what the bride and groom would expect from each, that's a tall order. It is for me. Maybe there's guys out there that do it. I don't personally know any, and like I say, I'm not a wedding photographer, videographer. The camera is designed to do it, but is the human designed to do it, right? Can the human split his brain and do both really well for a wedding? I'd love to hear from any of you wedding photographers who are watching this, because I think the tool is there. I just not sure how you'd pull that off. So here's a question that I'm also trying to figure out about this camera. It feels like it's being marketed to me, right? A professional still photographer. Not sure, maybe I'm just too interested in the camera itself. But it feels like they're going after photographers, not just videographers, cinematographers. Fair enough, that's good. But there's a larger question that brings to mind, and the question to me is the world going video? Is still photography falling away? So much so that a camera that's this strong as a hybrid really is needed. It's really a marketing direction. It's really the future. That's a huge question in this industry. As a still photographer, it's painful to contemplate that stills would be so minimized, but it's possible. After all, I'm speaking about this on YouTube. Well, for me, I'm not going to change being a portrait photographer. That's my stake in the ground. That's where I'm going to go. I create tangible, physical printed portraits, and I love it. It's my passion. I love video too, though. I started in video, and I do love it. So this camera's really got my attention. What about you? Are you interested in this camera? Does this camera seem like something you want or need? I'm really interested to hear other photographer, videographers' opinions on this camera, because Canon's invested quite a lot in design of something like this, I would suspect, and I think that they think there's something here. So I'd love to hear it from my peers, my fellow photographers. What do you think? Is this the camera for you? Is this the camera you've been waiting for? Really hope I get some comments on this and I can interact with some of you guys and hear what you have to think, because I think this camera is fascinating. Until the next video, cheers.